Okay, President Shin, back to you.
Oh. Is there a motion to move to resume open session at 1:01 p.m.?
So moved. Board Member Beeman.
Seconded, Board Member Joyce.
Board Member Chin, yes. Board Member Joyce. Board Member Beeman.
Yes.
Board Member Hall. Board Member Hemmons.
Yes.
Board Member Kirkbride. Yes. Board Member Kroger.
Yes.
Board Member Patel.
Yes.
Board Member Pinedo.
Yes.
Motion passes. We will now review and discuss the rulemaking hearing reporting the comments with Staff Member Melvin.
Thank you. This is Staff Member Melvin. For those of you on the phone, this is going to be mailing A. On October 15th, 2024, we sent out the rulemaking hearing notice via Gov Delivery to 5,083 rulemaking adopted rules subscribers. And they were invited to provide oral testimony during the hearing and also encouraged to email written comments. The hearing convened at 9:30 a.m. and it adjourned at 9:34 a.m. Record, I believe. 7 people joined the public call to listen to the hearing. No participants signed up to provide oral testimony during the hearing, and we received 5 written comments during the open comment period between 10:15 and 11:26/2024. The hearing was recorded, and the notice of proposed rule-making filings were available on our website. The staff members Klein, Melvin, and Runyon attended. And this is just a summary of the rules that were proposed, and all of the written comments were provided to the board in their entirety. Back to you for board discussion, President Shin.
We'll start board discussion with Board Member Hemmons. Do you have any questions or concerns about the rulemaking hearing report and comments?
No. No.
Board Member Kroger.
No additional comments.
Board Member Beeman.
None.
Board Member Pinedo.
No.
Board Member Joyce.
No comments. I appreciate the comments.
Board Member Chin. Then Paul.
Additional comments.
Board Member Patel.
No comments.
And Board Member Kirkbride.
No comment.
Goodbye. Thank you for the folks who did make public comment. We read the information and appreciate the input. Is there a motion to move to accept the November 26, 2024 rulemaking hearing report?
So moved. Board Member Beeman.
And Board Member Hall. Thank you. Board President Chin, yes. Board Vice President Joyce.
Yes.
Board Member Beeman.
Yes.
Board Member Hall. Board Member Hemmons.
Yes.
Member Kirkbride.
Yes.
Board Member Kroger.
Yes.
Board Member Patel.
Yes.
Board Member Pinedo.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. And we will now review and consider permanent adoption of rules starting with Staff Member Melvin.
Thank you, Staff Member Melvin. This is going to be mailing B. It's related to Division 115, OAR 855-115-0345, Services, Prescribing, and Protocol Compendium. And again, as part of the rulemaking hearing report, what you are looking at are the proposed amendments for permanent adoption. Let me just scroll down. Again, this would permanently add new versions of protocols to 855-115-0345 for coronavirus 19, influenza inactivated, influenza live, and RSV. Back to you, President Shin, for board discussion.
Thank you. Our adoption of a protocol, so I'm happy to go through by one. If board members feel like they need to discuss the coronavirus, are there any issues with coronavirus? And people on remote, Board Member Hemmons and Pinedo, please feel free to speak up anytime. Are there any questions, concerns regarding the influenza and the activated influenza vaccines, recombinant influenza vaccines? Any comments, questions about influenza, like attenuated influenza vaccine? And then on the respiratory syncytial virus. We did have public comment, I believe, on RSV. I don't know if there's anything that we can do currently with the public comment. The hearings report.
This is Staff Member Melvin. What I would suggest, after we're done with the mailing B, there are proposed temporary rule for us to discuss, and that may address some of those questions. Okay.
Hearing no concerns, is there a motion to move to adopt proposed rule OAR 855-115-0345 to be effective upon filing? Member Kirkbride, so moved.
Ms. Board Member Joyce?
Thank you. Board Member Chin, yes. Board Member Joyce?
Yes.
Board Member Beeman?
Yes.
Board Member Hall? Yes. Board Member Hemmons?
Yes.
Board Member Kirkbride?
Yes.
Board Member Kroger?
Yes.
Board Member Patel? Yes. Board Member Pinedo?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Back to Staff Member Melvin. We'll review mailing number B1.
Thank you, Staff Member Melvin. I guess, yes, B1, this would provide exemption to registration requirement. This is related to, sorry, let me scroll down. Give me a second. Division 35, it would amend the rule by adding that a business or another establishment who only distribute over-the-counter short-acting opioid antagonist drugs at no cost are not required to register with the board as a non-prescription drug outlet. And we look down here. That is going to be paren 14 is the new language. And again, there were not any comments provided on this that I think that we need to discuss. So back to you, President Chin, for board consideration.
It's something we've gone over a few times. I don't personally see any changes and I don't have any discussion. Please raise hand or state in the microphone if you have any discussion topics on this. This is something we've all been in agreement with, so is there a motion to move to adopt proposed rule OAR 855-035-0005 to be effective upon filing?
So moved, Vice President Joyce.
Second, Board Member Beeman?
Thank you. Board President Chin, yes. Board Vice President Joyce?
Yes.
Board Member Beeman?
Yes.
Board Member Hall?
Yes.
Board Member Hemmons?
Yes.
Member Kirkbride?
Yes.
Board Member Kroger?
Yes.
Board Member Patel? Yes. Board Member Pinedo?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes unanimously. We will now review and discuss the temporary rule and proposed protocol starting with Staff Member Melvin.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Staff Member Runyon.
Yes. We're gonna dog and pony show. Ready? Okay. All right. So this is mailing C. This is not to confuse you. This is the same rule. We met with the formulary committee and we'll go through this. This proposed rule amends the same rule 855-115-0345 with new versions for contraception. It would temporarily adopt a revised vaccine protocols for, again, coronavirus, different version, hepatitis B containing vaccines, meningococcal, pneumococcal, and another RSV. And then it also proposes to repeal VVC. So I'm just going to show you the rule, and then we're going to open each of the protocols, and Staff Member Runyon will go through what the formulary committee suggests be amended. So if there are no questions on the actual rule, I will close this and we'll just move into, this is going to be mailing C little a. We'll start with contraception. I'll turn it over to Staff Member Runyon.
Staff member Runyon, good afternoon. I'd just like to start by saying what an honor it's been to serve in this role, even in the short period that I've been here. Especially in this instance to liaise between the board and the committee, and impart and facilitate the implementation of the board's directives and will to change the protocols in such a way that reflects the changing and evolving practice landscape, and kind of response to public comment that we've gotten and in response to changing needs. And I think the PFAC was, the meeting was very fruitful in doing just that. I'd like to give a special thank you to board member Kirkbride. She volunteered a little of her time to give me some historical background in ways that were relevant to, some pending protocols and some questions that we had. And then I just wanted to commend the PFAC for what was a very smooth meeting. And when I'm facilitating meetings like that, one of my main tenets is, we don't always have to agree on everything, but we can always agree to treat each other respectfully. So there were some highly charged topics, as as we'll cover, that were brought up. But the meeting itself was very fluid in that everyone, gave space to each other in order to express their opinions. So I really appreciated that. As far as the contraception goes, as you may know, there was a recent update. I think the previous US MEC update was 2016, and it's now been updated to the 2024 version. So looking at a high level overview of the changes, in general, there was an addition of recommendations for chronic kidney disease. There were some revisions to recommendations for patients with certain characteristics or certain health conditions. And then there was an inclusion of additional methods or dosage forms of contraceptives, including but not limited to oral and some injections as well. Okay, and if you're following along on the public call, the yellow denotes that we've made amendments to the protocol, and we'll address those as we go down. So on the first page here, you'll see just the references that were changed. And again, they're changed from the 2016 US MEC to the 2024. So we have the summary chart, the practice recommendations, the full US MEC there. And in the resources, you see CDC highlighted. I think the previous iteration, it just said app. So to make that a little more informative as to what that meant, we included a link to that. So there is an application available for these guidelines as well.
Oh, there was a change.
And then scrolling down through the patient intake form, as I've mentioned, and an overview of the general changes. Now there's a question addressing chronic kidney disease there, number 20. And there is an addition of sickle cell disease here. And then the changes highlighted here, we had previously written the brand name out, so Depo-Provera, and the PFAC wanted that changed to the generic. And this verbiage also reflects verbiage that's present later in the form. So they expressed interest in unifying those, so there's consistency within the document itself. So that's what we did here. So I'll group these together. Before the meeting, there was an inclusion criteria list on the left and exclusion criteria on the right. And then as you move down the pathway, it will direct you as to whether or not a referral is required. If they meet the exclusion criteria, or if they do not, you can proceed through the process. So all of those amendments are essentially one. They felt that it was too restrictive to keep the inclusion criteria, and those things would be addressed at later points in the form, as they wanted as many people as possible to go through this process and not be off put by what may be perceived as potentially limiting verbiage, in step one. So the background information exclusion criteria alone, and then the flow from question 1 to question 2, or changes we made there. And you'll see an update to the reference OAR 743A.066, and that's just involving insurance reimbursement for contraceptives. We provided the link there. And then there is an additional qualification for the quick start. In terms of using the backup method, we've highlighted it there, the addition we made that's in the USMEC. Unless the patient is within 5 days of the last menstrual period, we added that verbiage. And then there's an additional ORS reference there. And that just outlines the need for referral during and after the prescription process. As we move further down, this is just the second part. So we're talking about the injectables here as opposed to the orals. So all of the aforementioned changes apply to this, the background, exclusion, inclusion criteria, etc. And there are just some minor additions here for the update. And the rule references again. Are there any questions about this particular protocol before we continue? And then here is the summary chart. So you can see the additional conditions on the left. And then in some instances, those conditions, if they weren't completely new, there were subdivisions or stratifications of those that are included on the right-hand side. So maybe an additional letter, as you see in breastfeeding, for example, A and B were not, they were previously clumped together. So there are some instances where the condition itself may not be new, but in correlation with the updates, those conditions have been stratified out, leading to additional recommendations. And you can see chronic kidney disease, which was mentioned on the intake form, question 20. And all of those questions are new, and this corresponds to the summary chart, the color-coded summary chart that we have referenced. And then we have DBT and PE recommendations, and the majority of those are new. You can see there are some instances over on the right. Actually, yeah, the majority of those are new. The surgery is a new addition, solid organ transplant moving further down. And again, these are essentially just the copy and paste from what you'll find in the official document. And you see the references there again. Of note, we did have an older, I think it was Division 19 rule that we changed, of course, to the new Division 115. And there we have it. Any other questions? The last part of that. Okay, so with staff member Melvin, we'll move on to mailing CB. And I think this is everyone's favorite by now, the coronavirus protocol. So, of course, with the recent ACIP meeting in October 2024, there were additional recommendations. Generally speaking, for patients 65 and older, a second dose went from it went to recommended as opposed to being an option. And then patients 6 months and up that are immunocompromised, second dose is recommended. And then patients that are immunocompromised from 6 months up, they can receive a third or additional doses using shared clinical decision-making, which we've expounded upon later in the document by request of the PFAC, and provided the timeline with that as well. So what I want to highlight here is I think this solidifies a point that the board's made more than one occasion, is that these changes happen quickly and they're often difficult for us, even when we try to stay as up to date as possible, just due to the cadence of the meetings themselves. It's difficult to, in some cases, anticipate what's going to happen. So with this, we had this ready last week, and then the PrEP Act has been extended to 2029. And so I'm happy about that. The first thing I thought was, okay, now we have to edit this again in real time. So again, that just goes to support the point that perhaps in the name of patient care, as you've all mentioned, that streamlining the process, perhaps it's time to consider that as we have. And there is a distinction between streamlining the process and the product, which is the form. And I think under the direction of the board and through the PFAC's implementation of that direction, we've been able to streamline the product. As you'll see, I think I cut about 4 or 5 pages out of the COVID protocol. So in general, what the PFAC did, we were focused on organization. And what I mean by that, we're typically playing like Where's Waldo in some cases with, let's say, a pregnancy lactation recommendation. Sometimes you would find it in one section, sometimes you would find it in another. And you could easily do the keyword search if that's an option, depending on what format you're using, what software you're using. But the PFAC felt that in the spirit of streamlining, that it made more sense to create an individual category for those high importance items. So that's exactly what we did. So we'll update the PrEP Act up top and just note that it's being extended through 2029, December 2029.
So I'm gonna. Looking for yellow highlight. Give me a moment, please. Sorry. It's somewhere in here. There we go.
Okay, and so this is just reworded version of what I mentioned initially. These are the changes that the ACIP recommended. And so you're going to see this a few times because of the age ranges for the vaccines. So we're in the section now talking about immunocompromised patients. So you're going to see it listed for 6 months through 4 years, 5 years through 11, and then 12 and up. So we'll scroll down and you'll see this exact same copy and paste or verbiage there. And what we tried to do is keep the exceptions relative to the table complexed with the table or juxtaposed next to the table, so you don't have to look at several additional places in the document for some supplementary information. Okay, and then here we are at number 4. So in addition to the organization aspect of streamlining, we also focused on unification or standardization. So in other words, we wanted the licensees to, every time they pick up a vaccine protocol, to know that number 4 is always going to be additional considerations for use. And we tried to pare that down so that it actually was additional considerations for use, as opposed to just being a reiteration or a text version of all of the information that was in the table, which is what you'd find in previous iterations of the protocol, which can be confusing. So not only does it create potential confusion when you add more words or more volume to the protocol itself, it takes away the focus from the things that are more clinically relevant. And one of the PFAC members mentioned, which I also can sympathize with, they mentioned that if I find something at the table and then it seemingly addresses it later in the protocol, then I wonder, am I missing something? Why is it in here twice? And then I get wrapped up in wondering if I'm interpreting it correctly. And so not only does it potentially create confusion, I think as board member Kirkbride mentioned yesterday, the more we enter onto these forms, the more likelihood there is for an error of any sort. Of course, that's what we want to avoid. So here we're standardizing the forms. We added the shared clinical decision-making just to give the licensees a little bit more information about what that actually entails. And then there's a link to the reference document from the CDC, ACIP, and what that actually involves, link number 9 there. From the initial protocol, we had a plethora of information, a lot of it duplicative, which we got rid of. And then we simply streamlined the considerations for immunocompetent individuals into the supplement here. And then there is some of this that's duplicative, but we separated out into the immunocompromised individuals that you see listed in C. And this information is all information that was in the document. It's just organized into one section. And here we have number 5, and this is consistent amongst all the protocols you'll see today, the pregnancy and lactation section. And then just creating the flow here from pregnancy and lactation to warnings and precautions, then contraindications. And one thing you might notice is that we got rid of the how supplied section. So this was also an element where a lot of duplicative information was present, and a lot of information or a lot of points were present. The data points were present. They're really kind of time consuming to ensure the accuracy of. So all of the COVID vaccines, for example, if you look at the excipient ingredients in all of the vaccines that are available, I think we had a list of over 100 individual ingredients. And so that's difficult, especially when you're having the patient look at those or having the licensee look at those and screen for potential allergies. You want to make sure that that's accurate. So that's one of the reasons the PFAC felt that it was kind of beneficial to take that out. And not only is this information readily accessible to our licensees, it is typically, it would be accessible for them in a way that's more up to date than what these intermittent, quarterly updates we could do here is going to provide. And then you see the reference in number 9 about the shared clinical decision making. Any questions on the coronavirus 19 protocol?
Great job.
Okay, we'll move to mailing CC, which is the hepatitis B vaccines. So one of the few adjustments or amendments we made in this protocol actually had to do with the difference or disparity between minimum acceptable spacing, which you'll see in the CDC documents, and then recommended spacing, which you'll actually find in the package insert. So Rachel, if you'll scroll down just a little bit, perfect. So reference number 9 that you'll see throughout all of the vaccines there is actually the CDC document that talks about minimum acceptable spacing. And so we wanted to add that reference in there because it was previously just referencing the package inserts, which talks about the recommended spacing. And there is a difference there. And then I changed some of the references to the package inserts because they were numbered incorrectly. Okay, and we'll see I added or combined a few additional schedules. The catch-up alternative, accelerated, and dialysis, putting those in one section. And then if you look at the catch-up pediatric Hep B vaccine schedule, dose 2, the highlighted portion after dose 1, that was not in there. So it simply said 4 weeks, and just to keep the verbiage consistent with what's below it, and another table that just added after dose 1, quote unquote. Then I added a reference there. I think it was missing reference number 4. And the spacing on this one was not entirely accurate, if I can say that. So the accelerated schedule for this, if you look in the package insert, you have 4 doses. It's 0, 7 days, 14 or days 21 through 30, and then 12 months from dose 1. So previously in number 4, we had 11 months from dose 3, but because there's a week range within which it's acceptable to give the 3rd dose, it could actually be 11 months and 1 week, or 11 months and 9 days, because it's the 3rd dose you can give between 21 and 30 days, and that's in the package insert. So we just made sure that that was accurate. I changed the verbiage there on that. And there we go with the standardization. Again, each of the protocols has additional considerations for use. It's number 4. And then in as much as we could, we tried to organize the additional considerations in a way that made sense, grouping like information together. So here we have, for the Hep B vaccines, there is a considerable section on determining patient risk. And you can see those, 1 through, probably have 5 or 4. And vaccine interchangeability, we grouped all of that together. Booster doses, we grouped all of that together. Serological testing was present in a couple of different locations. So all of this information was present in the previous protocol. We just combined it into one grouping. Okay, and you see again the appearance of those standardized sections. No new information, just reorganized. And then there's the storage and handling. I believe I spoke about that during the last protocol, about just referring the licensee to the most recent or most current prescribing information. May not necessarily come in the form of a package insert. Any questions on this protocol, hepatitis B?
Of course.
Was an email sent out by the immunization division about ceasing immediately. So the company went bankrupt. So we need to remove that product from all the references in the protocol.
Board council, is that problematic? This is gonna be a temporary rule. Yes, and that name is not in the rule, of course, but
Right.
before I file it, I can
When you're,
strike it. I think that would be like a statutory minor correction.
right,
And I mean, if, yeah,
because it's
thank
like,
you.
and it's a temporary rule, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Or what are we changing in this particular one?
So is it just every instance of that name? I'm going to get this right.
Yeah.
Just say that. Just say that.
Staff overrunning, so we're just striking every mention of the prehab bureau. in the protocol.
So.
Real time. Oh, I'm sorry. So for the motion, yes, as revised. Thank you.
Now we'll go to mailing CD. And this is the meningococcal containing vaccines. This was also an ACIP update from the October meeting. There was a unification of the Bexsero dosing schedule with the Trumemba, which you'll see a little further down in the document. Unless this one's also been removed for the market. Thank you for that. One piece of feedback that we got was it wasn't explicitly mentioned in the document that the MinVO is not for individuals 56 years of age and older. So we wanted to include that in the instances where that was mentioned in the document. So you'll see the addition of those there. And then here's the unification of those that was mentioned in the what's new section. And then again, just the standard sections that we created. No additional information was added at any point. It's just restructured from that point on. Any questions on this protocol? Okay, we'll move on to mailing CE, which is the pneumococcal containing vaccines protocol. And this protocol probably contains the most significant amount of updates that we have to make. Of course, two huge updates here in June of this year. The Capvaxive was approved. So we have that listed here as the PCV 21. And then per the October meeting, the ACIP recommended reducing the threshold for routine recommendation for vaccination with the pneumococcal containing vaccine to 50 years of age and older as opposed to 65. So you'll see several instances throughout where we change the numbers there. And there you have it, just changing from 65 and older to greater than or equal to 50 with a reference change up top. And then these charts you actually find in the ACIP job aid. So the accessory information below, for example, the first one also applies to people who receive PCV 7 at any age and no other pneumococcal vaccines. All of that information we just unified with what's in the job aid for the ACIP. And those are all pediatric recommendations. There were a few that didn't have references. So I just added the reference to those there. It's the only thing. And here's where the majority of the changes take place, I think, through the next 4 boxes. And so this is 19 through 49. So those that aren't covered by that now lowered routine recommendation for 50 years and up. So what I did here is every instance that we had a PCV 20 or PCV 21, I just combined those into one box because it's the same recommendation. There's no point at which there's any differentiation between the schedule if the PCV 20 or the 21 is given. So it was less confusing to combine those into one box as opposed to having three different boxes if you're using the PCV 15, and then have another box for the PCV 20, and then another box for the PCV 21. And then under the pneumococcal dose, seen on the left, the criteria is that the bottom two boxes, the patient could have had either of those. So instead of saying the last PCV dose, we just change that to last pneumococcal dose because it could have been either. And again, you see at the bottom of the box there is just the supplementary information. And in particular, there's a lot of that stratifying different types of immunological conditions or types of immunocompromise, if you will. So we just made sure that that mirrors what's present in the job aid as well. Same thing here, we just added the PCV 21. And same thing here as well. Grouping those together, find that supplementary information. And then we cut out as much information as we could. As you may know, this is one of the more complicated vaccines in terms of the schedule. So we cut out as much as we could without changing the clinical relevance of this. And at the PFAC's request, we also teased out the shared clinical decision-making component here, which is different than some of the other recommendations because it has its own unique criteria, I believe is included if we scroll a little further down. And we've included their reference document as well, or reference to that document. Yeah, so there you'll see in 2, you'll see that the shared clinical decision-making actually gives some very specific criteria, whereas in some instances, if you're looking at vaccinating for an additional dose of COVID vaccine, it may not be that specific. So we included the verbiage there and the links in 12 and 13 for the guidance documents. And then no new information, just reorganized into those unified categories. Any questions on the pneumococcal containing vaccine protocols? And I think last on the list, we'll move to mailing CF. Second to last. And it's a very minor change on this one. Again, we got some public comment about the utility or potential drawbacks of incorporating or including the house supplied section is when a new dosage form is brought to market. Though it's the same vaccine, it may not be included in our house supplied section. And so the PFAC felt that that would just increase the liability for the pharmacist, perhaps for the board, and potentially limit access to care if that's not on there, or if the house supplied section is on there, but the particular dosage form that's new is not on there. And again, because this is readily available, they felt it was prudent to take that out in response to that comment. And that's the only change we made on that one. I think overall we were able to cut on average about a third of the the protocols out, again, without compromising the integrity of its applicability in terms of clinical relevance. Any questions on the RSV protocol?
Remember incorporated to, related to the removal of the house supply, we do list the names in the title. So is that gonna be a problem that we have in the title of the protocol, the available products, but then a new product comes on, not mentioned in the title? Does that mean pharmacists are gonna be able to use it with that section removed? And then my second comment is for consistency, did the committee have discussion about removing that in all the protocols as a best practice? Or did they just talk about RSV?
Staff member Runyon, I'll just a second question first. I just need clarification. When you asked if they consider removing that from all protocols, what particular part are you talking about?
The house supplied section.
Yes, we've removed that in all of the protocols presented today. Yeah, so all of them that were open, we removed that from all of them. And then one point I might bring up, which may indirectly answer your question. The public comment was specifically, if I recall correctly, about the Abrisvo, and there are two forms of it available. I think the active vial presentation was what was not specifically included in the protocol. So it was still underneath the brand name. I do understand how if there is another product brought to market, how that could be potentially limiting. What I would say is that given recent board direction over the last day, could we argue that we may move forward with some other sort of approach before I'm not aware of anything that's in the pipeline for, these protocols. So we may have solved that problem before it comes back up.
Board Member Cookbright, thank you.
Keith? Anyone else? And now we actually have the last one, which is mailing CG. And this is the repeal of the VDC, or vulvovaginal candidiasis protocol. So the PFAC felt on this one that it wasn't appropriate to include any protocol that would require a diagnosis at this point, and that the symptoms provided in the flow chart are too general to provide a differential, especially without the ability to incorporate any sort of physical assessment, of course. And so treating with the fluconazole, for example, as part of an option as a first-line therapy when there are other over-the-counter medications that are available, certain members of PFAC did not feel was appropriate. Understanding that through the protocols, however, these medications could be covered if they were prescribed. So understanding that cost could be a barrier to access and care, and they still felt that because it involved diagnosis, because the symptoms were very general, and there was no ability to provide differential there, and that it wasn't appropriate to continue with this protocol. Any questions on the VDC protocol?
Cookbright, I know in the past, we've been told the board doesn't really have the ability to track or know how much these are used. Do we have any awareness that this protocol was being used? I'm thinking of impact, so I'm assuming the impact is gonna be fairly low, assuming fairly low use of these protocols, or does the board have any information to share on that? Staff, I mean.
staff member Runyon. I'm not aware of any way to track that because you're talking about these aren't linked electronically to any sort of operating system. You're talking about independence, multiple chains, and those systems that don't communicate either with our system. And some of these are paper. You know, people have printed these out and they don't access them electronically. So to my knowledge, we don't have any way to track that. The PFAC did say that if there were some amendments that the board thought was appropriate, tiptoeing around the things that I mentioned, the generalities and presenting symptoms, the diagnosis that's inherent to the treatment pathway, et cetera, if it wouldn't consume too much additional time and resources, that they might be open to entertaining a future iteration. But the outlook on that was fairly dismal, reading in between the lines. I didn't see a possible outcome where all of those things could be satisfied and it would be worth our time or juice worth the squeeze to go forward with this one.
Different protocols in the pharmacist renewal, so, I could run a report to see how many people have selected that option.
So they self-report on every protocol?
We have a list and have, I can't remember the verbiage, but something, you know, if you're using these, please check. So it wouldn't necessarily describe how many people are using it, but, it would be, I checked it, yeah, it would be a rough gauge. I don't know. Haven't actually evaluated this information.
This is Board Member Chin, and maybe not for today, but maybe for a future board meeting. I think I'd be interested in knowing how many checks on all of those protocols, since we had them in place so we started in 2018, when the PFAC started. What we're seeing in terms of the check marks, at least, just to have some idea. That sound okay with board? Thank you for that information.
Okay, so no more questions.
Is any further board discussion regarding the temporary rule adoption?
This is staff member Melvin. If I could make one more comment, just so licensees or anybody that's listening they're not confused when they see this. In the rule, for the first time, on 2 of these, you're going to see the day in our version, because what's happened is we are adopting coronavirus 1224 in the rule you just agreed to adopt before we viewed this, right? Then we're going to turn around and file a temporary rule. So the version is now going to be 1217. And the reason we have to do that is because it's temporary rule, it's only good for 180 days. So our next proposed rulemaking hearing is not until May. So we needed to get 180 days, and to get us to June, that would start at the 1217 mark. Does that make sense? Just don't want to confuse anyone. So for coronavirus, the version will be 1217, 2024, which would be on our website. And the other one is for RSV. So that's why those have days in them.
Thank you.
You bet.
Any other comments or questions from board members or board staff? Okay, let's move then to a motion. Is there a motion to move to adopt temporary rule OAR 855-115-0345 as revised to be effective upon filing?
So moved, Vice President Joyce?
Again, Board Member Cookray. Board President Chin, yes. Board Vice President Joyce?
Yes.
Board Member Beeman? Yes. Board Member Hall? Yes. Board Member Hemmons?
Yes.
Board Member Kirkbride? Yes. Board Member Kroger? Yes. Board Member Patel? Yes. Board Member Pinedo?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Thanks for all that information. Staff Member Runyon. We will now review and discuss the 2024 Annual Performance Progress Report, Key Performance Measures, mailing number D. I think doesn't matter. For reporting year 2024, starting with Staff Member Klein.
I'm sorry. Can you give me one moment? I was prepared to introduce. the
Oh, okay. We're just reviewing, because these are our members of the board. This is just what was posted on our website. So these are our performance measures and right, so the board did their best practices last spring. This is the rest of that data from prior
Yes, it was.
we just go through and just high level, just talk about like where we landed and why. And I'm staff member Hennigan, and Evermouth can maybe weigh in if you need.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I called, I got the financial update, but I think that's coming later. So I'm gonna lean heavily on staff member.
Oh, could you pull the microphone to, thank you.
So these are key performance measures. If you all are familiar with them, you'll recognize them. They're reported year over year. These are reported to the state legislature. And they track kind of various performance measures for various parts of our business. So you'll see in these the impact of kind of the environment that we and you all are operating in Oregon. So, and I'll ask staff member Ekman to explain if folks have questions, but the kind of target measure is there in orange, and then the performance year over year is in blue. So this is for percent of inspected pharmacies that are in compliance annually.
Mirrors 23. Good.
The discussion or questions about this one.
To the next, okay.
Next, please. And then this is percentage of individual and facility licenses issued within 30 days. We were just about to hit the target there. Every month when staff member Hennigan reports, it's hunted up at night.
I'm doing better than we had for quite a while.
Yeah.
Board Member Joyce, so compared to other states, like where do we stand? Do you know? Anybody knows? Compared to other states, I mean, like the 64% compliance rate for inspected pharmacies and this one, as far as licenses, target, anybody knows statewide or nationwide where Oregon stands?
Aware, this is staff member Klein. I'm not aware of the comparability across state for these. This is adopted by our state legislature with input from state agencies, but there's not always a lot of apples to apples comparisons. It's generally, in my experience, very focused on the specific business of each agency. And it's, we have discussed as a staff recently, kind of any tweaks we can make to kind of get more granular in the way that we report this so that we have more influence over the outcomes of the measures. And it's a pretty involved process that if if we, make a recommendation to address that, you will hear all of that, but it takes a couple of years to be able to, change any of these measures, and it had to be adopted by the state legislature. So I'm not sure. I'll answer.
All right, we're ready for number 3?
Okay.
Okay.
And this is the percentage of pharmacies inspected on the 2-year timeline. And with the target in orange and the actual performance.
Bottom of the detail, so this is just the pharmacist drug outlet, not all the outlet, right? Because it's except,
That number from up, not in our head.
do we have data? Like, it's coming, like,
And we have a monthly data that I sent in a email to the board and staff where both compliance and licensing report on their monthly numbers, and there's much more detail in there. If you look in your calendar.
Sorry, Staff Member Klein, can you pull that mic? The people on the phone probably can't hear you. Thank you.
Right. It's reported monthly, so yeah, if you look for my name in your email, you'll be able to find a week. It says this week in the board of pharmacy.
yeah, it's usually says weekly. I was looking for more kind of annually over the year, but that's.
The next measure, please, unless there are other comments or questions.
Board Member Kroger, can I go back to that? I'm a little confused. So there are 808 retail and institutional farm, or 808 total. Correct?
Staff member Efron, I was on leave when this was calculated, so I will do the best to be able to interpret the data here, but I was not initially, I wasn't part of pulling all the data.
So I guess my question, how we're reporting this is the pharmacies inspected every 2 years. Trying to get, like, what I'm saying, like, 50% is 100%. Okay, I guess, next time we see this, maybe have it a bit more clear as to like, are we actually, because it looks like to me, we've actually beat our goal. We're inspecting more than, right? I guess I'm just saying the way that it's presented, I'm confused by what's actually occurring.
This is staff member Efron. I think this is back to having the ability to be transitioned to the biennial inspections. And then the KPMs haven't necessarily been realigned to mirror that. So there's the confusion in when it's a 2-year cycle, you might get less than 50% one year. And you're still actually meeting your target because you might get more than 50% the next year, and then you are 100%. So we're almost doing a little bit of a disservice maybe in the intentionality and how we're ranking ourselves, right? So yes, I think I totally understand what you're saying.
I think you guys done a good job, but yeah.
So you would add the 81 and the 21 and you did 102% for the 2-year, and then.
I think maybe it's just how it's presented is what, it's not telling the right story that we're trying to convey, that's all, so.
Bottom of the detail, and sometimes. Reason I was kind of asking is because sometimes pharmacies, they have multiple licenses, they have the retail and the institutional license, right? So you're saying that it's 808 Oregon retail and institutional pharmacies, or there might be some overlap. So let's say those 100 pharmacy, they have licenses.
Yes, so staff member Efron. So it does, all retail pharmacies would include IP and RP in the data because they're both retail drug outlets. I think the other part that's not necessarily counted for here is if other inspections are done also, right? Like wholesaling
and manufacturers, CDAs, there's other types of registrants that aren't necessarily calculated, that is work the board is doing. It isn't necessarily, again, this is a small scope of what is reported to legislature related to very specific key markers.
We have 808 Dell institutional farms.
As board member Chin, I also noticed that these are annual reports, but the inspection cycles are not annual. So it throws it up in terms of how you look at it as well, because it's not. It's just a graph, people, it's just a graph. It's for the legislature. Wonder how much time they spend on it.
The staff's busy, they're doing their stuff, it's not coming across necessarily as such, right?
These key performance measures can be difficult because there are some inherent lag due to the legislative reporting. It's just, these can be difficult to interpret. And I think if the board decides to take on any kind of amendments to make them more clear, you could consider reporting in a way that gives more credit to where credit is due. Next, manager, please. So this is KPM number 4, average number of days to complete an investigation from the complaint to the board presentation. So this is number of days, and you can see the target is 100 days or less. And we can see year over year performance between 2020 and 2024.
And this doesn't, is there verbiage underneath this that has some explanation of the differential and why, what was happening in real time and why that? Excellent. There it is.
Yes, there.
Okay, what did we comment? I'll live through why this is like this.
Yeah, and I'll just say, as someone new to this world, this reflects what I've heard from the people involved in the work of infections and in the world of pharmacy that you all work in, that the workload is increasing and the number of people available to do the work is decreasing. So, or remaining stagnant. So it reflects kind of in a visual form what I've heard and experienced from people that I've spoken.
I think this goes to a question I had about like how many cases are above, say, whatever threshold, because I'm sure there's many cases that are done less than 100 days, but then maybe you have a handful that are taking a lot more time, which is skewing that average in a way that's like I said, it's not necessarily like the right story. So, but it's hard to track that. So.
Any other comments or questions about this one? Measure, please. This is customer service. And you'll see there's another customer service policy that's going to be implemented in the next year that came out of the executive branch. So this is coming out of the legislative branch, but we will have multiple customer service measures. So this reflects the percent of customers rating their satisfaction with the agency's customer service as good or excellent. And you'll see the target is 90%, and then you can see year over year for the various categories. So there's the categories overall, timeliness, accuracy, helpful expertise, and availability of information.
This board member Patel, and Who is the customer? Is that the licensee or any general public? Both of them?
Staff member Hennigan, currently the survey is going out to all individuals that obtain a new, individuals and facilities that obtain a new license. So it goes out to applicants that have obtained a license.
Those applicants, that the outlet applicant or any applicant across for licensee, registrant?
For every registration we issue, they will get a registration or license, they will get the survey.
Okay, but only new, not the renewal.
Correct.
You should do with the renewal too, but I know it's too much.
Any other questions or comments about the customer service measure? I'll just say, I received in-person feedback from some, colleagues at NABC that several people mentioned that our staff were really helpful. They received kind of service, that they were always happy to talk with them, and I felt really proud of our staff for reflecting so well on the board. And I didn't know this person at all. So it was great to hear as kind of one of my first outings on behalf of the board. Get that good feedback. Okay, so the next key performance measure is number 6, board best practices, and I believe you all, this is based on a survey of you all, so you may recognize these questions. So the target measure is 100, and then year over year, the actual number is shown. So you can see it's slipped between in the last 2 years. It's gone down. This is a self-evaluation. Questions or discussion related to this measure? Is the last measure. And as I said, we as a staff have discussed like how to improve these measures, and the board is interested in going down that path. We can have a discussion about your preferences in terms of what to measure, how to report it, how to visualize it. Maybe a conversation to have with the next executive director, I imagine.
Thank you very much. So, is there any further board discussion regarding the KPMs? Maybe then we will now receive an update regarding our strategic plan, starting with staff member Efferman.
You, staff member Efferman.
Give me just a second so I can share. Sorry.
Second, I would like to give Executive Director Klein kudos on not being prepared. That was very well presented.
Yep.
Okay, so I will be providing some high-level updates on staff's progress in implementing the board strategic plan. Slide. So the board met on 11/10/2023 and discussed their strategic plan for the next 5 years. The plan was finalized at the April 2024 board meeting, effective from 2024 to 2029. So the 5 organizational pillars created are as follows: licensees, registrants, innovation, operations, regulation and compliance, and communications. We'll address each section today. So this slide is just for reference. I will not spend time going into the goals and key actions, as our discussion today is intended to be high level and to address the progress for the strategic plan implementation. For each pillar, I will provide the goals and key actions for reference and then focus on updates related to execution of selected actions and progress indicators. Next slide. So to achieve these goals, the board and staff has mapped out high-level implementation timelines and assessment strategies. As previously discussed, the execution timeline is a living document, and edits will be necessary to ensure effective execution. Staff will provide the board progress updates so you may continually review and refine the plan as needed to meet the board's mission. Please note there's been significant changes in staffing over the past year, and the agency has lost approximately 25% of agency staff. Staff is committed to achieving the board's strategic goals. However, timeline adjustments will be necessary. Due to onboarding 3 new board members, 2 new PFAC members, and 9 new staff members, the agency has not had the opportunity to revisit the projected estimated timelines. The pharmacist consultant and I have this on our high priority list to address. Also, please note the legislative session begins soon, and we will likely need to revisit priorities with the board to meet the agency's need. We ask the board to give staff grace and have patience through this process. Staff is committed to this process and communicating our progress with the board and interested parties during every regularly scheduled board meeting. So to dive in, year 24-25. In regard to monitoring and respond to licensees' rule changes through complete assessment of effectiveness and challenges of revised licensee rules, as of 1/21/2024, board CPE for Division 115, 120, and 125 is posted on the board website. To date, collectively, the program has been accessed 1,408 times, and there may be some repeat accesses on that, and staff has monitored and received feedback related to the corresponding rule changes. In regard to implementing a process to routinely collect and analyze licensee data with support from partners and interested parties, staff currently has created several user-friendly feedback forms that are located on our website as a way to internally collate, review, and assess feedback to apply to future rule writing efforts. We've also streamlined system related to rule language suggestions, comments provided outside of the rulemaking hearing process. Looking towards 25 and beyond, in regard to collecting licensee feedback on accessibility and behavioral mental health service information and upgrading visibility support for licensees, staff is currently researching the best ways to achieve and align this in alignment with other boards. There's no reason to recreate the wheel on this, so we will have more to report in future meetings as we move with other health boards. And for certificates, certifications and training standards, staff will work on creating a plan to research options for certifications and training standards to provide to the board in the upcoming 25-26 years. Right. So again, this is just a slide for references. We're moving into registrants. So in assessing registrants for the 24-25 year, in regard to drafting and adopting new rules for pharmacy registrants, the board will remember in 2023 and 2024, staff began researching and making necessary statutory changes to amend wholesaler, manufacturer, and 3PL laws to be in alignment with the Drug Supply Chain Security Act, DSCSA, effective date 11/27/2024, with a few caveats for smaller dispenser exemptions. Much work will be needed in these areas to adopt updated rules, and staff will bring forth proposed rules for the board's consideration in future meetings. Staff also plans to bring forth rule priorities list with staff recommendations for board discussion and direction at the next applicable board meeting, with the goal to ensure alignment with rules priorities list and the direction from the strategic plan. This will include rules related to non-pharmacy registrants. Looking further into 2025, in regard to direction to study and propose ways to ensure access to medications and pharmacy services and continue and enhance the safe pharmacy practice initiative. This is an ongoing process, and staff will discuss these topics at the next applicable board meeting to get board direction on how you would like to move forward with that. Slide. So this is for innovation. Again, just a reference slide. Diving into the innovation pillar, we will begin with assessing uptake and impact of pharmacy technology solutions through collection of baseline and trend data. The board has been working on this for several years and has implemented rules to permit pharmacy lockers, kiosks, and remote dispensing site pharmacies. Staff will continue to stay informed to bring additional potential technology solutions for safe practice forward to the board as applicable. in regard to collaborating and responding to proposals that support board goals through innovation and technology that address safety and access. Through interested parties' input, research and assessment of additional types of technology, several new registration types have been created. For example, pharmacy lockers and kiosks, and staff does and will continue to bring forth to the board new concepts and rule modification proposals in alignment with these conditions. In regard to applying technology solutions to enhance accessibility to board information and resources, and specifically completing accessibility improvement for the board website, staff has begun researching available options related to this topic and plans to bring forth information in a future board meeting. Operations. So in 2024, staff completed and will continually update procedures for board member and staff orientation and streamline agency processes. We created and implemented virtual PIC CPE training courses on our YouTube channel effective 1/2024. To date, 189 people have completed this program. I previously shared CPE for Division 115, 120, and 125 have been accessed over 1,400 times. Staff will continue to assess areas of rules that would be a good fit for board CPE and when new rules would be applicable for this process also. For the governor's strategic initiatives, the agency is on track and has completed all on time. With the addition of a new ED in the next coming year, analysis of staffing levels and roles will be reevaluated in order to meet the agency's needs. And in 2025, staff plans to focus on the following items: assessment of the board's website and agency interfaces for opportunities to increase services online. Our hope is that if the board's budget is approved by legislature as submitted, the possibility of migrating to a new licensing regulatory software system will increase end user experience and improve customer experience while streamlining processes for staff. For applications, staff has designated time to systematically review and update all of the applications. Also in 2025, we will create ongoing processes to solicit board feedback regarding revised onboarding processes and meeting agenda building processes. Next slide. Regulations and compliance. For regulations and compliance pillar, in regard to refining processes and pace of rule revisions to fit board and public capacity and increasing diverse input in these processes, board staff has greatly slowed down the pace of proposed rule review, and it will likely take some time to get back into the flow of bringing urgent rules forth at a pace that addresses both the board's and public needs. We will continue to strive to find that balance and communicate with the board and licensees in a transparent manner. For the past 2 years, the board has utilized GovDelivery to enhance transparency and communication in an attempt to gain targeted feedback by those directly impacted by rule changes. Staff also has worked to increase visibility of topics on the board website to provide transparency and access in hopes to elicit feedback from the public. In regard to conducting review and update of registrant rules and thorough fact-based review and analysis of cases, approximately 4 years ago, under the guidance of former Executive Director Joe Schnabel, staff created a comprehensive process to assess current rules, provide assessment and track information to utilize for future rule revision. The pharmacist consultant utilizes this comprehensive document to assist in drafting proposed rules that are then completed by the weekly rule writing team before being presented to the board. Cases provide the board information related to effectiveness of current rules. Staff does and will continue to track and provide recommendations to the board based on identified areas of concern. Slide. Communication. And finally, for communication pillar, many of these processes to implement communications will depend on preferences from the new ED and balancing many of the agency's priorities that include issuing licenses, completing cases and inspections, and drafting proposed rules. Staff's plan for 2025 and beyond is to continue to complete annual outreach presentations at both OSPA and OSHP and at both pharmacy educational institutions in Oregon, Pacific, and Oregon State University. Staff has and will continue to transparently communicate the board's strategic plan. Staff has and will continue to assist in responding to public inquiries. There continues to be a compliance officer on phone duty during hours of operation, and staff is focused on improvement of the website to assist in ease of communicating information. Staff is also committed to enhancing communication and processes for rules feedback. the last slide. I will hand it back to Board President Shin for any board discussion or questions.
Thank you very much for the big overview and the updates. Appreciate that. Particularly since you were gone for time for this. Any board discussion, questions? Yes.
Board Member Kroger, great presentation, Bree, love it. I've sat through a number of presentations on standard of care practices. And I think maybe Gary has also listened to some NABP type meetings. I think as we're kind of headed back into rule writing and rule assessment, I would love to have the board staff and the board understand standard of practice and have that at least, part of what we as board members are kind of considering as we look at rules. So I don't know what that would look like, but I think as we're headed back into more rule writing, I think, like you said, that there is some kind of document that you used for rule writing. I think it would be a good time to also make sure that part or that view is good.
This is board president Chen. It is something that I've heard over and over again at NABP as well. I would make a suggestion that we request that board staff Runyon maybe has a presentation for all of the board members regarding what that means and what the pros and cons of standard of care and rule writing are. To just help us to shape what we're looking at and how we view the rule writing for our licensees.
Staff member Onion, all I have to do is give me a timeline and I'll take care of it. And within reason, staff member Onion, I retract that.
Well, this is, we also need to note that this is two board members and not the entire board, so I would like
This is
to.
Board Member Patella, I'm with you guys.
I do meet with you. But are there any concerns from any other board member regarding this request? Because I would like to make sure that we're all on the same page.
Board Member Kirkbride, not a concern, but I wanted to dovetail on that. For the first presentation by Interim Executive Director Klein, that's the first thing I thought of when I saw that graph about our compliant pharmacies going down. And I really do believe as we become, as other states are changing more quickly, not anything against Oregon, but as other states might be changing more quickly, being heavy on rules is gonna lead to pharmacies being less compliant. It's just at some point impossible to stay up on top of every little thing. So yes, I support.
That leads to the just culture when you talk about the rules and how when there are variations and complaints, how we as a profession, including me in this, in all healthcare, this just culture was not how medicine and healthcare treated errors and mistakes and things. And so when we're looking at all of this, I will send out information about just culture that I got there's a slideshow. But anyway, I think that all dovetails too. Board member Bean.
Yes, the board member being, please, let's start going down this path. Again, because I know a long time ago, there was a similar discussion and kind of got aligned by COVID and having to kind of deal with things on the fly. But we, as I said at the strategic planning in 2023, we are so in the weeds from having everybody check boxes that we're losing sight of what it is to actually practice as a healthcare professional. And that's not good for patients, though it might seem good that you put the rule on paper. If you can't, as a practitioner, practice
it doesn't matter if you check that box or not, it's in the name of patient safety and not actually affecting patients.
Board Member Joyce said 2 words, less prescriptive, less prescriptive.
For this, I'm just laughing. So, Board Member Pinedo and Amines, we've had chances to chime. I just want to make sure that you have an opportunity to chime in.
Thank you.
Member Hall, nothing to add. I agree with what everyone said. I would like to see, rulemaking, some kind of, guideline, it would help when reading them, I think, so that would be really helpful. And it doesn't have to be super complicated, but yeah, the presentation was great and, happy to see things that we talked about, moving forward.
Wonderful. I think this has been great, and I would like to propose a break, but I would like it, Staff Member Effernoff, are the thingy bobs ready for us?
Yes, staff member about right now, Kate is.
I have a
grabbing-
question.
So
Board Member Hemmings has a question.
I would like to do a 20-minute break instead of 15 so that we have an opportunity to not just have our break, but also transfer our data. If that works for everyone here.
Chair Chin, Board Member Hemmings had a question.
Yes, Board Member Hemmings.
Yes, regarding this issue about, rules and being overly prescriptive, this is for the OAG. Is there an OAG on every licensing board in the state of Oregon?
Sorry, you mean the AAG?
Yeah, sorry, AG.
Yeah, okay.
Board Council?
So if you, I would, yes, I mean, the state boards generally have an AAG assigned to them.
Does the AG usually attend their board on every licensing board in the state of Oregon? Does the AG usually attend the board meetings?
This is Board Member Chin. I know on nursing board and medical board, and as far as I know on pharmacy board, they have.
I mean, every board that I represent, currently,
Okay.
I used to do 7 and I did all of them. So I just got done with 5, so.
Okay, so I'm gonna assume that there's a history here as to why the Board of Pharmacy became, it sounds like at some point they were less prescriptive and then it changed to be more prescriptive, probably pre my time. So I guess my question is, I'm trying to understand, did something happen? Were there legality issues that came up why the Board of Pharmacy moved towards being a more prescriptive, rule heavy? I'm not in opposition of that. I'm just trying to understand the history of why there was this change. Because if you're going to begin to look at rolling back or scaling back rules, you need to look at your history to see what happened and how you got here. Because what you don't want to do is roll things back and then you end up repeating history, whatever that history is, and I'm not familiar with it.
Board Member Kroger's jumping in, I will defer to a pharmacist, but I will put in my 2 cents maybe.
Board Member Kroger, I think that's a really great point. Board Member Hemmings, when I think about, I don't know the full history of Oregon and Oregon law, but I think the profession of pharmacy has changed and has changed rapidly over the past, 10, 15, 20 years. And how pharmacy is practiced has changed. And I think as pharmacists, the education standards have changed. The scope of practice has changed. And so I think that laws and rules will change with those changes. And I think as we, as a profession, move towards that different role within healthcare. The standard of care model for regulatory oversight of these health professions is what we see in the medical professions, what we see in nursing, and we see in other practices, and we don't see it quite as much within pharmacy. And I think I want to be very mindful that we're not rolling back regulations. I think as we move forward and look to future regulations, I think it's important that we understand what is the standard of care that we should be holding pharmacists to. And having that as our, just as in the back of our head as we're looking at future regulations. I think there's a big difference between rolling back regulations and as we go forward, looking into what is the standard of care for pharmacists here in the state of Oregon. So that's kind of, but I think your caution on why are we where we are today, I think as we consider future rules, we still need to be mindful of what's going to be in the best interest of the people in Oregon. Go ahead, Ken.
Thank you. That was very well stated. And my knowledge on history of the rules of the Board of Pharmacy, and please, Board Member Beeman have been here much longer than I have, is that we didn't have less prescriptive rules in the past. The rules were written in a time when education and scope of practice, just like Board Member Kroger said. So it's not that we went from one to another and then we're going to go back to another thing again. It's that what it has always been needs to change and reflect what has changed in pharmacy profession. If that makes sense. Yes.
Staff member, just one thing to keep in mind too is not to forget about the registrants. So I hear the licensees standard of care model, but then also making sure that the difference between this board and medical and nursing and other boards is that you do people beyond places. So making sure that there's time to think about and consider both those different options too. We don't get laser focused on just the people because there was a lot of changes that happened in the people over the past 4 years, and you have some registrants that have not been updated since the 70s. So just putting a little scan in there for open-mindedness as we have.
That is a very good point, because those are also very outdated. That when we look at how we do any discipline, we've noticed that as well. Board Member Beeman.
Remember being to Staff Member Efron's point, though, we, I think, have fallen into, because we do people in places, almost treating the people like places, that you have to fit within these guidelines or else split. And that's not how other practitioners are treated. They have room to practice and room to have professional judgment. And I think as pharmacy and the practice has shifted, we need to start, and I think we'll have a great board with forward-thinking people that hopefully want to support that shift as well. And so while we do need to keep certain things with check boxes for places and for certain basic requirements, we shouldn't keep treating people like a place.
Vice President Joyce, so over the years, we've transferred a whole set of rules from one division to another. And so when we did that, we updated a lot of those rules because a lot of them were outdated. And in that process, we actually trimmed out quite a bit of fat, so to speak. And also, like the clinical role of the pharmacist has expanded. There's now the clinical agreements, right? There's more autonomy for pharmacists to practice at the top of their profession. And there's more autonomy when it comes to with technicians, of course, their roles are continuously changing. And we have compounding rules to address here in the next few months, and we have several rules to address. So we'll keep everything in mind to be mindful of how prescriptive we are as we go forward. But just the role of the pharmacist with the clinical agreements will continue to change.
Member Kroger, I think really my intent in bringing this up is I think it's like I said, I've sat through a number of presentations on what standard of care regulations are. And my intent with bringing this up is that I want this whole group to know some of what I know and really understand what that looks like as we're considering rulemaking for whatever division, and the ask of Gary to kind of present that to us so that we're all on the same page when it comes to that, or maybe not the same page, but just the same level of understanding of what that means, because it can be widely interpreted. I think would be helpful, because like you said, we've slowed down a bit on the rulemaking, but I don't expect that to continue. And as we head towards that, I think if we're all have a better understanding of that type of regulatory model, I think that will help us. Not saying that we need to go that direction necessarily, but that we have an understanding of it.
Absolutely. Super. Any other comments before we take a break? All right, then let's take a 20-minute break. It's 2:40. Come back at 3 o'clock. Everybody, and then somebody else.